Let's try considering the possibility that we can teach the computer every single possible game of chess in the universe. How many chess games do you think exist in the entire world? Let's try to calculate it once. Let's say that we started the game from this original position, and now you can see that white can make 20 different moves. He has 8 pawns and 2 knights. 8 pawns go to 16 different squares, and these 2 knights go to 4 different squares. That makes a total of 20 moves. So we can see that any move like e4, d4, knight c3, all of these in the totality of it would be 20 different moves. But for every single move that we make as white, black has 20 different possibilities of responding. Let's say I moved d4, then black can respond like this or like this. And it would have been the same case in this position, this position, this position, and this position as well. So we can see that black can actually respond to with 20 different possibilities for every single move of white. That makes it a total of 400 different games in just two moves. However, we are going to move even further, and that's what will make the difference. So let's see. Well, such a tree of chess is actually finite, but it has way too many branches, and every branch, like every point in that branch, represents a game. So imagine this that if this is my starting position and this is my mating position, I can go to a particular mating position in millions of different ways, and there are, in fact, millions of mating positions as well, maybe. So every path that is created is a chess game. But how many are there? I want you to take a guess. I want you to take a guess at how many total unique chess games are ever possible. Well, if you have a number, bear with me, I'll show you one. 10 raised to the power of 120 possible games. I mean, you don't even realize how big this number is. You know how many atoms are there in the universe? 10 raised to the power 119. So 10 times more than the number of atoms in the universe. That's how complex a game of chess is. But how does it really affect us? Because, I mean, you might assume that, okay, a human can't really calculate it because a human has only limited calculation power, but a computer is made to compute, it's made to calculate such things. So, can a computer do that? Well, theoretically, it can. But how much time do you think a computer will take to calculate every single game, even a supercomputer? Again, take a guess. Well, if you again have a number, I would just say the time is a lot. And how do you represent a lot? Well, consider this. If you started the calculation, if you had a computer at the beginning of universe, even then the calculations would still be going on because even a computer has finite computing power, it has a finite speed. And even if it were to iterate, thousands or lakhs of games a second, it would still take years to calculate every single game. So clearly, calculating every single game is not the correct answer to making a chess engine. Well then, so until a few years ago, there was only one possibility of making a chess engine. But today, we have two. Let me introduce you to them both. One is a human crafted chess engine, which we'll talk a lot about. And the other is the new buzzword in the market, the artificial intelligence chess engine. Um, so let's start with the human chess engines. How do they work? Well, what they'll do is they'll analyze two things on a given board. So, for example, I showed you that there were a different number of positions, right? And we just calculated that okay, we can't actually iterate over all the branches, so we have to select a few branches over the other. We have to somehow know ki, okay, this particular branch is a losing one, so we do not have to go and calculate in that part. We have to stay in our own domain and try to, play the game in the winning portion of it. So that's what we do. We try to analyze position based on material, position, yeah, based on material and how the board looks. So that's what we do. we analyze a game based on the material and the position. But we can see that explaining material to a computer is relatively easy. For example, if I have to explain it to you that a queen is more valuable than a bishop, I could just say, okay, a queen has these many points and a bishop has these many points, or a rook has these many points. So, for example, we know that a rook is traditionally given 5 points, whereas a bishop is given 3 points. So trading off a rook for a bishop is bad for you, but trading off a rook for two bishops is good for you. So that much math a computer can do. So that is why it is easy to tell a computer which trade-off is beneficial for it. But there are difficulties while telling which position is better for it. So yes, you can see that pawn trading for a bishop will be good, very good materially. But how do you explain this? This position, which looks relatively clean, versus this position, which does not look relatively clean. I mean, it is still materially equivalent. No side has lost any pieces, but yet you know that the second side is losing than the first side. So how do you exactly tell which side is better? Well, what we do is we try to calculate what is called a positional advantage in a real number scale. So consider it like this. To say that a thing is greater than the other or A is greater than B, I need to bring it down to some scale. I mean, consider your own game. You might argue that by making one particular move, you were getting double pawn structure, while making other particular move, you were getting safety of the king. And you know both are important, but which one is more important? And it actually depends on situation to situation. How much danger are you in? How much can you afford to make mistakes in that particular position? So that is why bringing it down to a real number scale is really difficult. And that is what human chess engines do, actually. So we give manual input to those situations where we are trying to teach strategies to a computer as we taught strategies to a human. So, for example, when you came to this channel and when you saw videos or wherever you learned professionally chess, you got to know different strategies of playing, right? You got to know to look out for pins, skewers, more tactics, chess captures and threats, and so on. So that is what we try to teach to a computer. Okay, these things are beneficial to play along, and even different stuff like king safety, pawn structure, discovering checks, all of that. So they get more points, points in the sense of material advantage while we scaling. So the scale in which material advantage is stored, we store positional advantage in the same scale. So, for example, you can see this particular bar to the left of your game in most websites. So this bar is the Stockfish engine analyzing your game and telling probabilistically who is going to win. But this number that you see here, the point 0.3 that is written here, is actually your advantage score on black. So, for example, let's say the entire position was same and you had just lost one pawn. So black would have an advantage of one over you. And you can see that point 0.3 is not really the value of any piece, and since all values of pieces are integers, you can't really get point 0.3 materially. And that is why you have got this point 0.3 number positionally. Now, earlier, chess engines used to do the same thing, that they'll calculate advantages materially, they'll calculate advantages positionally, and what they'll do is they can actually iterate over many different depths of move. So, for example, even as a human, when you play, what do? You make a move and you think about, okay, what might my next move be? If you are really good at playing, you might think, what might my two next moves will be? What might my three next moves will be? Really good players think up to five moves, six moves, the next five or six moves. And so does a human chess engine. Uh, Computers have the computing power to actually analyze moves five or six steps ahead of them, and thus give you more accurate results based on positional and material advantages. So, for example, if you have the availability of capturing a piece. A computer will calculate, कि, okay, I'll get this much material advantage, and when I play the next move, I might get pinged, and I might get a check, and I might lose a material on a fork or something. So then it would calculate that, okay, after five moves, I'm behind in the total score that was given to me by the engine. So that particular path is bad. So let's choose another path. And it generally tries to choose the best path possible. But end games are played very differently by chess engines than what this material or positional advantage would tell you. So let's look at that tree graph again. So we started with the same starting position, and we went for really different branches. And branches are just spreading out uncontrollably after three or four moves. And even these many branches that I'm showing, there are multiple of them. You already learned that there were 20 starting from the first point itself. So there are multiple branches just going out, uh, and you could, try calculating them forever and ever and ever and ever. But stuff changes when you start thinking from the other end of the board. So you know that even though there are a lot of branches in the middle of the game, only a handful of checkmate positions are there. I mean, the word handful is really wrong, but compared to how many branches were there, checkmates are really handful. So games end in very particular positions, um, especially in the end of the board. So I'm not really saying checkmates happening in when all the pieces are there, like something like scholar's mate or something, but rather when there are very few pieces on board, particularly seven pieces on board. So when that situation arises, you can see that if these dots are your checkmate positions, then we can somehow think backwards that okay, if this is my position right now, what might it have arisen out of? And thus we draw backward arrows. And thus we somehow do the analysis of the board in a retrograde fashion. And that's the scientific term for it, in fact, retrograde analysis. So that's what we try to do. We try to pop out branches on the other side of the timeline and try to, somehow uh, get this thing right. And now, if we are at these positions, the ones where the arrow started from, then from these positions, we know exactly how to proceed because we know exactly which part to take and how do we reach the checkmate. In fact, you might argue that not all games result in a checkmate. Many of them result in a draw by stalemate or 50 move or anything. But we don't really need to analyze them because if we have the knowledge of all these games that end in a checkmate, and if any other game comes up, then we can automatically say that, sorry, boss, this game will go to a draw. So, no analysis for that. And that is what we actually do. And that is stored in something called a table base. So, what exactly is a table base? So, table base is a collection of every possible game that can arise out of seven different pieces anywhere on the board. So in these seven different pieces, both the kings are included, and yeah, both color pieces are included. So for example, I could have both the kings, both the queens, and three pawns anywhere, like two pawns of black and one pawn of white. And then I can tell you exactly how one side can win. And when I say exactly, I mean that no matter what the other side does, what the losing side does, I can tell you exactly how to proceed to win or at least get the game draw. So that's what a table base does. And in fact, we have got table bases for six, five, four pieces, and so on. So, for example, let's say that you were playing a game with seven different pieces, and one of your piece got traded off, and now you have five different pieces. So that's how we actually build the table base. So we had first built the table base of five pieces, and now for every position of randomly different oriented five pieces, we since we know how the game will end, we actually trace it back to six pieces and then to seven pieces, and now we have solved it for seven pieces. And that's what we are trying to do further. We are trying to solve it for eight pieces. In fact, Gary Kasparov once famously said that I think the limit will be eight pieces. So a computer won't be able to calculate more than 8 pieces, is what he believes. Well, time will tell what happens with more computing power. But currently, I want you to explore how these table bases might arise. Like how might you decide to calculate? For example, let's try to think about a three piece table base. And in those 3 pieces, I want to, both kings will be there. And for simplicity, let's have the queen. Now, you might say, okay, how many positions do we need to consider for that? So you might question how many different positions do we need to consider even for this three-piece king, king, and queen table base? Well, you can actually reduce them somehow. So for example, let's consider this king, king, queen, and we can see that okay, the first king can come on 64 different squares, and then the second king can come at max. How many different possibilities will be there? So if the first king sits at this square, then these 3 squares are definitely banned, and so we have removed 4 squares, and thus the second king can come to 60 different squares. And then the queen can come to any square except these two, because the queen check will be always valid. So yeah, 60 into 64 into 62. But by clever mathematics, we can actually reduce the number of possibilities. For example, consider these pieces, the king, the queen. Uh, you can see that they move symmetrically all the time. So for a king, since every single movement is allowed, and for a queen and for the other king as well, since every single movement is allowed, you don't really consider the board having directions. So what I'm really trying to tell is this, that if you can find out a table base for the original white king sitting anywhere on these squares, you can find out table base for any position. Because if you have done it for, let's say, this square, then the king sitting here doesn't really create a difference. You just have to flip the situation. And so on for this square, so on for this. So what I'm basically doing is dividing the board into 8 different half triangles sort of thing, so that calculations get relatively easy. So whatever calculation I told you, you can divide that by 8. And dividing it by 8, so yes, once you have got this particular half of your code covered, you can actually do the calculations for every single, 1/8 of the board. But these situations are only there in more symmetrical situations. So, for example, even if there was a rook or a bishop here, things would have been the same. But for pieces like pawns, the structure would be a little different. So, because the pawn moves linearly in a single direction, uh, it it's really different if a pawn is here versus a pawn is here, which was not the case in the more symmetrical pieces kind of thing. So yeah, you can't really have just this 1/8 of the board in case of dealing with a pawn. So dealing with a pawn is really different. And I would say that there would still be some symmetricities. For example, this and this square are really the same in case of moving a pawn. So basically, a king, and another pawn. So if you want to deal with that particular endgame, then these calculations would be the same. In fact, if you think carefully, you know that okay, the bottom and the top files are all anyways gone, because if the piece is there, then if it's in the top file, then it's already converted, and no pawn is ever in the bottom file, right? So if you can calculate the table bases for these squares that I'm highlighting and the squares inside of them. So yeah, these squares that are highlighted and the squares inside of them, then you can actually get the table base for pawn in every single location. So you can get it for the rest of the half. This was just an introduction to how calculations can be reduced cleverly and how calculations are actually done. Now imagine doing it for a king, and a knight. Anyway, you know that's going to be a draw, but more complicated things. if there are if they exist, for example, in a four-piece database or a six-piece database, and using a knight there, and knights are really complicated to handle, right? Because they won't have such ideal symmetricities as a bishop or a rook or a pawn or a queen or a king. So yeah, it takes a lot of mathematical manipulation and calculation to do this stuff. But I guess you are building something really smart out of it. So this is just an example to show you how engines behave differently when encountered with mating positions, or rather the table basis position versus normal positions. So for example, you can see that I'm making moves and sorry, yeah, I'm making moves and the engine is giving me a score based on how the position looks like. So yeah, you can see that the score here is zero point 0.9, and I'm just making random moves. So and you can see that the score is increasing somewhere. You can see that the engine could see that this particular fork is coming up, so it gave me a huge boost as the white player. So that's how engine deals with the normal positions versus. This is really different than what we saw in the original half, right? We saw that it was giving me some score based on material advantages, but it's rather giving me something called M7. So M7 here is called mate M7. So the engine has already seen this particular game in its table base because this is the three-piece base, right? And from there, it knows no matter what black does, at max, black can escape for seven moves and then he'll be mated. And that's what the engine is trying to show me. And if we play ideally, we should be able to get the mate done in seven moves. You can see that it showed me mate in six, so probably this move was correct. Well, chess engines don't always work as we want them to. For example, consider this situation. You can clearly see that white has no options to win the game. I mean, it's just a king. Three pawns are stuck. There's just one free pawn that will be killed any time it wants to. And you can see that black has a lot of material, but black can't really escape out of the prison it has gotten into. Of course, this situation might, or I don't know if it can be drawn in real life. This position can be set up in a real game, but if this position exists, then we can see that the game will probably go to a draw. In fact, if black wants to let white win, white can win through pawn position. But a chess engine will show that black is winning the game, absolutely, because it has calculated the game based on material advantage, and it sees that okay, there is a very high material advantage, and it cannot really comprehend the positional problem of the game. So these are positions where chess engines, human crafted chess engines, will rather fail. Well, let's come next to the artificially intelligent chess engines. They are really different than what a human chess engine might be. I mean, you might assume that they are upgrades over the traditional chess engines, that okay, computing power has increased, better software, and all that. No, they are an entirely new set of technology. It's really creative how they work actually. So, for example, like in an artificial chess engine, no human inputs are given. Human inputs like materialistic advantage or positional advantage. Ki, okay, castling is better, king safety is better, a queen is more valuable than the bishop. All that stuff. You don't actually tell that. All you tell is how the game runs. So you tell the rules of the game. Um, that's what is really interesting. So, for example, let me introduce you to a game, Battleboard. Assume that you don't know anything about chess. Okay. So, yeah, this is the situation. You don't know anything about chess. I've just introduced you to a 64 square board, and I'm introducing you to different pieces. For example, I've introduced you to a piece A that is really important, and that's that's what you need to keep safe. Then I'm introducing you to pieces B, C, D, E, F, how they function. One of them functions in two and a half moves, one of them runs away all the board, one moves diagonally, one moves vertically. Basically, I'm explaining you the rules of chess, but I'm not telling you that this is chess. So that's how you tell an artificial intelligence system as well. You actually, these systems are like human brains themselves. They learn the game by themselves. So, for example, let's say that you did not watch any video on how strategies to play chess or stuff like that. You just knew the rules. Then, what you would essentially do to play the game is you would actually have someone play the game with you, and you would keep making moves, and you would realize, ki, okay, I lost the game this time. I won't lose the game next time. So you will improvise over your mistakes. That's what is really important about these chess engines. They improvise by learning from their mistakes, and they do this by using something called a neural network. So, what a neural network is something very similar to our neurons in the brain. These things function very similarly. In fact, this is called a CNN or a convolutional neural network, and it does the same thing as we do. It learns from its own mistakes, and that is, I think, the most important part of it. So yeah, and given these situations, it will actually self-discover openings like the rail or the London system. Of course, it won't call them that name, but it will self-discover that part. And that's what is, fascinating about these systems, and in fact, artificial intelligence in general. I mean, these, engines and the entire world around computers related to game theory really excites me because, I mean, how fascinating is it that we could teach a computer how to play a game, and then that computer would beat you in your own game? But chess is one of the games where it is not really completely cracked, and that's what makes it really complex. Other simple games like Four in a Row, Connect Four, or Tic-Tac-Toe, or Nims game. Games like these have been actually completely cracked. In fact, checkers also has been cracked. Also, it took multiple years to crack checkers, but checkers is relatively simple than chess. Chess has not been done yet. Chess probably won't be done in the traditional way that we assumed it to, ki we will have enough computing power and then we'll calculate every possible branch. But artificial intelligence might actually be a way to crack chess. So that is it for today, guys. Hope you liked this video. It was a little different than usual chess learning videos. If you want to watch more such content, subscribe to Chess Gaja. And if you want to watch anything in particular, even bizarre videos like this, do drop a comment and we'll make a video on it. Thank you.